My name is Carol Wilhelm, and I welcome you to the Powell-Liberty Historical Society's program of May the 10th. We are recording on May the 5th. The program is entitled, All Men Should Be Free. It's a privilege to have Dr. Ronald St. Pierre share his love of history with us. He is a man who has worn many hats throughout his life. He had a 45-year career at Ohio State University, and he followed that by a 3-year interim role at Capital University here in Columbus. As an educator, his research has encompassed public health issues, immunology, transplantation, and cancer biology. He's been recognized with a wide range of awards for his research and community service. For nearly 20 years, Ron has performed first-person interpretations of the Ohio History Connection, including creating fictional characters for their educational programs and performing in their dinner theater productions. We can look forward to hearing how Ron became interested in portraying a collection of interesting people after this presentation today. We now join Reverend John Rankin of Ripley, Ohio, as he offers a lecture sponsored by the Ohio Anti-Slavery Society 170 years ago. Welcome.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, as was mentioned, I am John Rankin. I want to talk to you about a thing very near to my heart. But I want to start out by saying I noticed several of you here noticed the young man outside the building here that looked like he could wrestle a bear and come out the winner. I noticed you also noticed the 3 young men standing at the back of the room. The thing you don't know is out back, we have 2 other people. You'll find out why we're having these folks. All but one of them is a Rankin. 3 of them are my sons, 2 are my nephews. The large man out front is my son-in-law. We have to do this for your protection and for my protection. I'm here as part of my biennial tour of the southern part of Ohio, where I spend the better part of 15 days talking to people in various communities about the institution of slavery. I have a compatriot who does from the north down to the central part. 2 of us cover the entire state. We do it every 2 years. Except for an incident that happened about 10 years ago, 1841, I have never had an incident. But all 6 of my people, my security detail, are armed, and you are well protected. With that, let me say something here. On July 4th, 1776, the Second Continental Congress adopted a declaration, part of which says that all men are created equal, that they're endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Endowed by whom? The Creator. And what kind of rights? Unalienable rights. Cannot be surrendered. Cannot be taken away. Cannot be given away. But my friends, these principles are absolutely denied by the 15 slave-holding states of the United States. Their declaration is that all men are not created equal, that liberty is not an unalienable right, and that certain classes of people have not that right at all to pursue their happiness. I want to tell you my declaration. I consider involuntary servitude, slavery, a never-failing fountain of the grossest immorality and one of the deepest sources of human misery. It hangs like a mantle of the night over our vast republic and shrouds its rising glory. I sincerely pity the man who tinges his hand in the unhallowed thing that is fraught with the tears, the sweat, and the groans and blood of hapless millions of innocent and unoffending peoples. With that, let me tell you, I have felt this way for a long period of time. I was born in eastern Tennessee, raised in a strict Calvinist home, attended Washington College. After graduation, went into the ministry, received a call from the my college was Washington, in Jonesboro, Tennessee, and received a call from the Jefferson County Presbyterian Church. I went there, served there for several years. Many of my sermons began to talk about issues of oppression. That naturally led to slavery. I became much more strident in my opposition, and parts of my sermon related to slavery. As you might suspect, the elders of the church said, Reverend Rankin, if you're going to continue to talk about slavery, you may want to leave Tennessee. Now, I'm not the smartest man in the world, but I took that more as a threat than an opportunity. So my family was beginning to grow, so we decided we would head for the state of Ohio. Why Ohio? First of all, Ohio is a free state. Slavery is not allowed. Founded in 1803, part of the Northwest Territory. The Ordinance of the Northwest Territory of 1787 said any state emanating from this territory shall have no slavery. Ohio's the first, so that's where I headed. Now, we didn't go directly to the wonderful state of Ohio, which I love very much. I had a family. Family seemed to grow as we were moving. It took us 4 years. First part of it, we needed money. And I would find churches that needed a preacher on this particular Sunday or that particular Sunday. And I would do it on an interim basis. I finally came to the Concord Presbyterian Church in Carlisle, Kentucky. They needed a preacher. So I said I would be happy to stay. It was a wonderful church. The congregation had my same philosophy related to slavery. They had actually started a church. The church started a school for slave children. My friends, at that time, that's against the law. After the uprising by Nat Turner, a slaughter by Nat Turner, they voted, many of the slave states voted, no education for the slaves and their children. So it was a tough life. We had to move from place to place for every one of our lessons. It became a little tedious for people and the students began to drop away. We also ran short of money. They could no longer pay me. So I took that as an opportunity to head for Ohio again. We took off from the Kentucky side of the Ohio River at about 9 o'clock on the 31st of December. Literally, we rode all night. The tide was against us. We had to struggle to get there. We had several lashed together boats. We arrived the morning of January 1st, 1822. I had already accepted a call at the Ripley Presbyterian Church. where I stayed for 24 years. Most of my parishioners agreed with my philosophy. Yeah, some didn't. But for the most part, I was free to do whatever it was I wanted to do. We started our own school. I'll come to that just a little bit later. This included not only freed African slaves, but also mostly white people. I don't know what you know about Ripley, but it's a rough town. It's a shipbuilding town. It's a port. Things going up and down the river. We clearly had 3 times more saloons than we had churches, which became a problem. Almost every night there was either a fist fight, a knife fight, a gun fight, so it was better off to stay home. My anti-slavery views were well supported by most of my congregation. The other thing was, the pastor's house is right on Front Street, hard by the Ohio River. People knew what I did. Every night, someone was knocking at the door, wanting information on fugitive slaves. They were for the most part nice, but I also sensed a little bit of hostility. By this time, I had 13 children. 9 boys, 4 girls. I thought, this is not a safe place to be. I found a property on the Ohio River, but 545 feet above the river. I have a picture here of it. A little bit small for you to see. It's a little bit of a sketch. I don't know who the Indian is down here in the front, right there. As far as I know, he doesn't live there. But this is my house up on top of the hill. Let me pass it there so you can look at it. It is a wonderful place. Lush fields, several different kinds of orchards, fruit orchards, lots of space. Aside from that, I look down on Ripley. I look over at Mason County, Kentucky. I can look up the river. I can see the northern part of the counties of Kentucky. I can look this way and see the western part. It's perfect for someone in my position. I can look down. Anybody wanting to come to my place can look up. So this property performed everything we ever wanted. I still live there. My sons and I are constantly alert, hence the idea of them and my son-in-law and my 2 nephews being here with me today. It's difficult to get to my place. You have to come up 545 feet. My sons and I built, in the first 2 years we were there, steps. About 120 steps coming up the 545 feet. That's easy for someone to come up our steps, but we can see them coming. You can also get to the place around the back. That's not as easy to see. So we're forever watchful and vigilant. I'm proud to say that my house has never lost a guest. Never lost it. How many have you had, Reverend Rankin? I don't keep track. I don't know names. I don't know where they came from. They know me. But the estimate by my family, as we're still working at it, is somewhere around 1,500 in our existence right now. I'm pleased to say that we're able to give a bit of respite, a little bit of a door to freedom. These people are not hazardous to me. We're able to give some little bit of sanctuary. I feel that these people are children of God by their creation. Many of them, I think, have been blessed by the blood of the Lamb. I don't know who they are. I just know that someone brings them. We take them, drop them off with someone we know. Beyond that, we don't know anything. Well, I said that something happened 10 years ago. It was a nice September morning, Sabbath morning, as a matter of fact. My son, Richard Calvin, and my nephew, John P. Rankin, were walking to church. They decided they would go to church that way, and the rest of us went by way. As they entered Ripley, they noticed that there were some people they knew were from Kentucky, young men they knew from Kentucky, some toughs, as they referred to them. They were some toughs. They were giving the Rankin boys a bit of an eyeful. They were hesitant to really confront these young men because it's just the two of them. So they didn't ask them what they were doing, but they know they had never seen them that often in Ripley as a group. So uneasy did they feel that one of my son's young lady friends asked if they would walk her home after church, and they did. That night, just to be on the safe side, the boys decided not to sleep in their sleeping clothes, but simply take their shoes off and an outer coat, have a light blanket, stay somewhat awake. Along about 2 o'clock in the morning, my son Calvin heard whippoorwill, whippoorwill. Now he knows 2 o'clock in the morning a whippoorwill doesn't do any calling. So they were alert. They quietly, the two boys, John P., nephew, and Richard Calvin, as we call him, went out separate doors. One went to the north of the house, the other went to the south of the house. As Calvin went to his position, he confronted someone right there. His comment was, "What are you doing sneaking around my father's house?" Bang! The man shot at him. Hit him in the left shoulder. Actually, it's Gray's wound. Enough to knock him down, but he got back up, fired at the man, who he heard say, "Ah!" John P., hearing the shot on the other side, is moving a little faster. Suddenly he comes in contact with the man who fires at him, goes right over his shoulder, misses him, turns and runs. John P. shot at him, hit him right in his shoulder blade, and the man screamed. In the meantime, 5, 6, 7 other people are running now from the two boys. Everybody's armed. It sounds like an artillery brigade out there. Gunshots. My wife, Jean, is the calmest person in the world. I tend to be a little bit more excitable. I'm going around nailing windows down. We already had the nail holes put in. So that's the first time we've ever done it. Jean is standing by the front door like this. Because the 4 older boys are going outside. She said, "No, you're not. All the doors are locked. You're not going anywhere." Well, two of the boys decided, Samuel and one of the others, besides they're going to pull the nails out, they go out through the window. What they see is a fire near the barn. And they run over, and fortunately we had had a rain that afternoon. So the grasses were wet. The silly person could not get the fire started. So it did nothing more than just the whitewash on the barn had a little scorching to it, but it didn't catch any fire. So the boys joined into the chase of the individuals. They got into a stubble field, they're all barefooted, and so it was much more difficult for them to run, so they gave up. But by this time, people from Ripley heard what was happening up at the Rankin house, and they're there and they capture everybody. So the fellows are arrested, put in jail. The person that John P. shot died. I hate that. But so now I'm angry. I contact my friend at the Ripley Castigator, one of our better newspapers. We have 3 newspapers in a very small town. And this is what I put there on the next day. Recently, my family and I were attacked. And why was I attacked? Have I wronged anyone? No. But I am an abolitionist. I do not recognize the slaveholder's right to the flesh, the blood, and the souls of men and women. For this, I must be proscribed, my property burnt, my life and that of my family put in jeopardy. Now I desire all men to know that I will not be deterred from what I believe is my duty by fire and sword. I also wish all to know that I feel it's my duty to defend my home to the very utmost, and that is in as much my duty to shoot the midnight assassin in his attacks as it is to pray. We've never had another incident. I've been doing what I'm doing here with you for the past 15 years. We've never had an incident. Now, is it because we say that we'll not stand for it? I don't know. Maybe it's just because we are so vigilant in what we do. But we are still going to take no chances. I'd like to demonstrate, if I could, by way of 4 vignettes of what the impact of slavery is on people with whom I have had a great deal of interaction. The first is my brother Thomas. Thomas is younger than me by several years. Early in my tenure here in Ripley, as you know, I touched the Ohio shore in 1822. And in 1823, I get this nice letter from my brother Thomas. This is at our Front Street house. The one where everybody knocked on the door. It was a very disturbing letter. My brother, unlike his siblings and his parents, is a well-to-do individual. He's a merchant. He's a merchant in Virginia, in Augusta County, Virginia. He's writing to me to tell me that he has now moved up in society. He now has 6 slaves, just like the other people in Augusta County. Well, I couldn't believe it. How could my brother, unlike his siblings, feel that way about slavery? How his parents felt. That's not how he was brought up. I really thought I had got to do something because Satan has a grip on Thomas's heart. Now, if Thomas was part of my congregation, what would I do? I'd preach to him. He's in Augusta, Virginia. I'm in Ripley, Ohio. I'll write him letters. Now, my friends, these are not letters like you would turn one page and have an undone bomb. Says, still yours, your brother, John. These cover 7, 8, 10, 14, 20 pages. They're a sermon text. Between 1823 and 1826, I wrote 13 such letters to Thomas. The first two, somehow or other, got into the hands of my friend, the editor of the Castigator, the Ripley Castigator newspaper. He came to me and he said, "Could I publish these?" Well, I saw no reason why he couldn't. I mean, there's nothing terribly personal. Everybody that I could talk to knew that my brother was doing something I didn't like. If it could have any effect on anybody else, all the better. So every time I do one, I give one to the editor and he publishes it in the paper. The last letter I wrote was in 1826. In 1827, my brother Thomas sold his slaves, moved to Ohio, and never bought a slave again. In 1830, my letters were published as a book. I'd like to read to you, if I could, the very last page. The very last page. The end. Your brother pleads with you. Nature, by all her tenderest sensibilities, and the God of nature, by all those heavenly sympathies that issued forth from the Savior's bloody heart, plead with you, do justly, love mercy, and to let ye oppressed go free. And can you refuse? And if you do, I am your brother. I will not speak of your doom. Farewell. It worked. Vignette number 1. Vignette number 2, John Parker. John Parker was born in 1827, the child of a slave woman and the father, who was the owner of a plantation and known as one of the aristocrats of Virginia. John, at the age of 8, was taken from his mother and sold at a slave auction in Richmond, Virginia, to a new master, a doctor from Alabama. Secretly, John learned to read with the help of one of the sons of the doctor. Now, John was never a subservient individual. He was outspoken, he was defiant, and this led to many beatings, but didn't change his attitude or his demeanor. He learned a trade, and he became very good at it. Iron molding, the construction of decorative iron, so needed by southern plantation homes. When the doctor died, the doctor's widow told John if he wanted to, he could do work for people in the area and retain a portion of the money for himself. So as a result, in 1845, at age 18, John was able to buy his own freedom for $1,800. John moved to Ohio, moved to Cincinnati. He became a member of the Underground Railroad. Unlike being a conductor on the Underground Railroad, where he takes those that are brought to him and moves it to the other station, John went into Kentucky and brought the people out. A Cincinnati newspaper identified him anonymously by saying a more fearless creature has never lived. How fearless was he? One of the people he brought over, a young woman, he almost had to tie up to keep her in the boat. She insisted on going back to get her son, who was 14 months old. John said, no, we're in the middle of the river. We got to go all the way. All the way. This is while he's still in Kentucky, or in Cincinnati. She said, but what will I do? He says, not what you will do, is what I will do. You go to where I take you, and you stay till I come for you. What did John do? He went back to the plantation in Mason County, Kentucky, where that slave woman had been. He thought, I'll just go up to the room, take the baby out of the room. No problem. He gets up there. The baby's not in the room. He listens. He can hear a very quick breathing, two heavier breathings. Thinks to himself, the baby's with the man and his wife. Now what do I do? So he very cautiously opens the door, walks in, the baby's asleep. He reaches over the wife, takes the baby, lifts it up, carries it out, brings it over. Can you imagine that? How many times do you lift a baby and immediately, ah! Man's the luckiest person in the world. Fearless, absolutely fearless. He will not walk down a sidewalk. He lives in Ripley now. He lives down on Front Street, where I used to live. I could look down and see his house and his foundry. He's a very successful ironworker. But that just gets to me everything. I just can't imagine. He and I do not talk much about it. We're very cautious. We're very cautious. John Parker has a nice family. What's interesting is that his foundry had half the people come from Kentucky to work in his foundry. That doesn't happen very often, my friends. The next person I'd like to talk about is Benjamin Franklin Templeton. Benjamin Franklin Templeton is a free black man who came to Ripley for an education in 1831, 20 years ago. He came to attend the college that I founded in Ripley, and where I presently serve as the chairman of the board of directors. He was originally born in a plantation near Spartanburg, South Carolina, to a man by the name of Williamson and his wife. They had 27 slaves, of which Benjamin was born into. When Mr. Williamson died, his wife, who didn't care much for slavery, I must say, had convinced him that in his will he would free all 27 slaves, which he did. He freed them. Miss Williamson decided she was going to move to Ohio to be near her son, the Reverend William Williamson, who was a Presbyterian minister in Chillicothe and a member of the Chillicothe Presbytery. So Benjamin was one of those people, now free, who moves to Brown County, Ohio, and associated with Chillicothe, but living in Brown County. The Williamson family still takes care of him here because they team him up with his older brother. His older brother John, who was the first black graduate of Ohio University in 1828. So Mrs. Williamson has taught all of her slaves to read and write. They all become fairly successful as free black people. Benjamin is also tutored by his brother, a college graduate from Ohio University. The brother works for the Chillicothe Presbytery. The Presbytery takes up a collection to send John to Ripley College. John is the only non-white person in Ripley College, my college, that I found. He's well accepted by the students, many of whom are from the South. Townspeople, on the other hand, have a kind of live and let live approach, with the exception of one person, a man by the name of Franklin Shaw. Franklin Shaw. Franklin is a typical ne'er-do-well Ripleyite who spends more time in the taverns than he does working. The father is a boat maker. He works when he's sober. The son does, Franklin. They have another son by the name of Chancey. I'm sure it's really Chauncey, but everybody calls him Chancey. Chancey Shaw. Chancey was a student at my college. He ran out of funds and had to drop out. Franklin thinks this is terrible. Here comes this young guy from Spartanburg, South Carolina, local with the Chillicothe Presbytery, is paying his way, while his brother has to drop out for lack of funds. That's just not fair. White man can't go to college because he doesn't have the money. Black man goes because someone's paying for it. Not fair. He demands of me that we dismiss him. Well, that's not going to happen. And he said, if it doesn't happen, I will seek revenge on him. Well, we were concerned. We decided that at least for a while we'll see what happens, and he could be walked back and forth, that someone could be with him. After several weeks, nothing seems to happen. Benjamin says, I don't need anybody with me. I'm fine. Well, one afternoon, he's on his way home from college when Franklin, in a drunken state, snatches him off the street, pulls him into an alley, and thrashes him into unconsciousness. The sheriff grabs Franklin Shaw, arrests him, convicts him, and fines him $10. Franklin leaves, goes over to Mason County, Kentucky, and as far as I know, I've never seen him again. Whether he comes back, I'll never see him. Now there are people who are a little bit upset. So now we have the Southerners against the wealthy people who through various endowments and so forth, are supporting the college. And they say, what are you going to do about this? I mean, is this just the start of something big? So I come up with a compromise. I say, let Benjamin stay in college. I'll tutor him at my house. Everybody agrees. So I do as much for him as I can. And so 2 years after all of this takes place, he goes over to college in Indiana, Hanover College, over in Hanover, Indiana, where we know he's going to be safe. There are lots of free blacks at college. Ultimately, he goes to Lane Theological Seminary, where he's a student along with my son Lowry, and ultimately becomes a Presbyterian minister, ministers to congregations in Pittsburgh and Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and still going strong. The fourth of my vignettes, Chancey Shaw. Remember that? Chancey Shaw never did make it back to college. He began doing something totally different. He became the butcher in Ripley. I must say, runs a very nice butcher shop. He also has a secondary job. He's what we call a patroller. Now, I say that because you folks are here in Powell, Ohio. What we say really down in Ripley is he's a paddy roller. That means he patrols the river. And what's he patrolling for? Fugitive slaves coming across. This is one I was lecturing, preaching down at Franklinton just this past weekend. I saw this down there. Now, it's not a government document. I didn't destroy government property. As a matter of fact, it was laying on the ground. I thought I was doing a civil service by picking it up off the ground. But it says $100 reward for runaway from the subscriber, my black woman named Emily. So it's put up by the owner, Thomas Williams. 17 years old, well-grown, black in color, with a whiny voice. She took with her one dark calico, one blue and white dress, and blah, 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 blah. I will pay the above reward if she is taken near the Ohio River on the Kentucky side, or $300 if she is returned from the state of Ohio, and delivered to me near Lewisburg in Mason County. So that's what Chauncey does now. You can get up to $500 for returning slave. So this is in February of 1838. He knows the river. His father is a boat builder. He's lived on the river all his life. He knows the sounds. He can tell you what kind of a boat it is. He can tell you if it's a heavy loaded or if it's empty, going back to where it was originally started. But this is a different sound he hears. This is in the latter part of February. We had a little warm spell. The water becomes the ice becomes what's called rock. It will not stand up under pressure. It's still there, but you can't walk on it. So this is when people would come over in a boat. So what he hears is very strange. It sounds like someone cracking through the ice. So he hears a crack, splash, some swimming motions, and a thump. And that's followed sort of sequentially. And he's moving along the river trying to find, well, where's it coming? Who's going to come up on shore? He finally gets to where it is, and he looks out, he can see it, moonlight on it. It's a woman. And she's coming out of the water soaking wet. She's carrying a baby. What she was doing was she was falling through the ice, swimming, trying to keep herself up, throwing the baby forward onto the ice, the splash, splash, thump. God touched Chancey's heart that night. She came up out of the water, startled. He said, "Don't be afraid, I won't hurt you." Took his coat off, put it around her and the baby, walks her over to my stairs and said, "Go up here, knock on the door, the man at the house will take you in." Good luck. Anybody who would do that, sit down, anybody who would do that deserves their freedom. This is not the Chancey Shaw we all know. She did come. She stayed with us for 2 days. Soon after that, I was visiting my son Lowry over at Lane Theological Seminary. He said, Professor, one of my professors, Professor of New Testament, has invited us to dinner tonight. And I said, "Well, really, who is that?" His name is Cal. He said, "It's Professor Calvin Stowe." And I said, oh, okay. He said, his wife is the daughter of the president of the college. I said, "I know him." And he said, well, her name is Harriet. Harriet Stowe. She's Lyman Beecher's daughter. I said, Harriet Beecher Stowe. Yes. So we go there. It's a very nice evening. I'd never met her before. And that's the first time we'd ever had a chance to meet. So we're sitting around having coffee afterward. And my son says, Dad, tell the professor and his wife your story about the young lady coming across the river. So I related the story that I just gave to you. I looked over and Miss Stowe, Harriet Beecher Stowe, has tears running down her cheeks. And she is leaning forward on her knees and she said, how terrible, how absolutely terrible. After she composed herself, she says to me, Reverend Rankin, I have to tell you, I'm writing a book, and this story is going to be in it. Now, my son, who's long since left college, tells me, because he stays in contact with Professor Stowe, that book comes out next year. I look forward to reading that. I really do. I'm sure it must be something. And I said, what's the title of it? He goes, I'm not sure. It's somebody's cabin. I said, well, we'll certainly look forward to that, Lowry. Well, the low point in my ministerial career came just 5 years ago, 1846. Unfortunately, my congregation, the Ripley Presbyterian Church, where I had stayed for 24 years, got a little sick and tired of me traveling like I do here. Not only that, the congregation had changed a bit. They thought, as did the people back in Carlisle, Kentucky, that I was a little too strident in my opposition to slavery in my sentiments and sermons. So I decided I'm going to leave. I appropriately contacted the presbytery, told them what I was doing, and very shortly thereafter I left, followed by, metaphorically, 1/3 of my congregation. And we founded the Free Presbyterian Church of Ripley, Ohio. From that very, very small start, we have founded some 12 or 13 congregations of Free Presbyterian churches throughout the territory. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I feel we must redouble our efforts. I'm very concerned about what's happened last year. The federal government and the state of Ohio adopted it as well, what is referred to as the Fugitive Slave Law. This is a law that says that if you are alleged to be a runaway slave, all the owner has to say is, that's my property. And the person goes back with them to Kentucky. You say, well, go to court. Take them to court. Blacks have no standing unless they are already free. They have no leg to stand on. Now, it's even worse. If inadvertently any of you doing what you normally would do because that's what you've been taught, help somebody who is in need. They need warm clothes, they need a place to sleep, they need food. You are aiding and abetting a fugitive, even though you don't know it. Your next door neighbor knows it, and they turn you in because they get a bounty. What does it mean to you? Well, upwards of $1,000 fine and 6 months in jail. If you happen to be a farmer, I don't care if the 6 months comes at the beginning of the growing season, the end of the growing season, or the middle of the growing season, your farm's gone. Not only that, in the area near Ripley, Ohio, $1,000 buys you a pretty sizable farm. This corrupt law has to be done away with. Now you may say, but Reverend Rankin, you're defying the law. Do you remember after the crucifixion? The authorities in Rome told the apostles, you cannot preach, do not preach. There's a law against it. You cannot speak the words of that man. He's gone. As you know, Peter and the apostles continued till they were arrested. As they're standing before the officials said, you were warned. It's the law. To which Peter replied, I follow the laws of God, not the laws of man. So to tell Reverend Rankin, you're defying the law, I said, listen to what my friend Peter says. Now, I never mentioned this to you before, but it's very clear that my particular denomination, the Presbyterian denomination, is on the verge of splitting, north from south. I hate to see that happen. But some of my ministerial colleagues in the South will take the same phrases from the Bible and make it fit their particular support of slavery. How do I feel about it? Let me do this. And then the king shall say unto them on his right hand, come, ye blessed of my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me meat. I was thirsty, and you gave me drink. I was a stranger, and you took me in. Naked, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you visited me. I was in prison, and you came unto me. Then shall the righteous answer, saying, but Lord, when did we see you hungry and fed you? When did we see you thirsty and gave you drink? When did we see you as a stranger and took you in, or naked and clothed you? To which the king shall answer, say unto them, verily I say unto you, inasmuch as you have done this unto the least of these my brethren, you have done it also unto me. May God bless you all, and thank you for being so attentive. Such a wonderful crowd.
How does your wife feel about all of these years of dedication to your cause?
She has never once, you mean Jean?
Yes.
Yes. Jean has never once complained. She is probably my biggest proponent. In fact, very often she thinks that perhaps I have not gone far enough. Now, I mentioned we have 13 children. I said that 1846, with my leaving my original congregation, was the low point in my ministry. It was not the low point in my life. My first death of a child occurred 1 year after that. I lost a son to typhoid, and during the epidemic of 1847. She has been a stalwart, as have all my children. And it's a small house, with the exception of a recent marriage. All 13 of us have been in the house. Not only that, at least two foster children at any particular point in time. And that also takes in that we may put people And not only a barn, but if the weather's bad, they go down into the fruit cellar. The people that we are supporting in our efforts. So it's a crowded house. She says that she is forever cooking. But she never complains. I think she believes in the effort, which is good.
Did she help feed all this?
Yes,
These
she does.
kids,
Yes,
too?
she does. She feeds them all.
Some of the church members help out too?
They do, but they got to do it very quietly. Don't forget, that would be considered aiding and abetting. So they will do it very quietly. But again, there's so few people who, it sounds strange for as visible and open as we are, but there are a lot of people who don't even know what we do. I mean, they know there's this thing that goes on, but they don't know who does it. It happens very quietly. But those who do, will drop off things. And I never recruit. I never ever recruit. And frankly, I don't need to, because I have some neighbors who help out, plus the fact that I've got, now have 8 boys and 4 girls, and 12 children who help out, so.
Well, out of character,
Yes,
I'm just wondering, since I had the opportunity to see a list of some of the people that you portray for the Ohio History Connection, I'm interested in 2 of them, so I don't have their names, but can you tell us about the surgeon who attended President Garfield
Dr.
after
Bliss.
he was shot?
Dr. Bliss, yes. Dr. Bliss was from northern Ohio. He grew up about 5 miles from where James Garfield was born in Ohio. Garfield was a member of the House of Representatives when Dr. Bliss was asked to give up his medical license because he supported homeopathy, and it was also felt that he was not practicing good medicine, which was not true. And he appealed to Representative Garfield to something he could do, because they'd taken away his license to practice in Ohio. Well, he got it back. So that there was a linkage there. And so when Garfield was shot waiting in the train station to go out to Amherst, to Williams College in Amherst, Massachusetts, where he was a graduate, and was going to speak at 4th of July celebration, a man shot him. So one of the people, very interesting situation, his assistant secretary of state was Lincoln's son, Todd. And he knew that Garfield knew Bliss, so he told his driver, go get Dr. Bliss, bring him back here. So Garfield felt very good about it. When he was conscious, he did not lose consciousness at all. So that's the reason that we did that one. And I think you also asked if did we get our ideas from the center? They simply say, can you do something in the medical field with somebody from Ohio? So then I go back and I look at this. Here's the interesting thing. When Lincoln was shot, his son was right around the corner at a bar. So he was within 35 feet of Ford's Theater. Got there immediately. When McKinley was shot, he was in the entourage at the World's Fair. When Woodrow Wilson died, he was right nearby. And so after that, he said, if any president invites me to anything, I'm not coming because it doesn't turn out well. I just think that's so, there's his father, then, so anyway. Who's the other one you had there?
The other gentleman was, and I'm supposing you chose him because he was an Ohio physician and an educator, as well as a horticulturalist and a naturalist. I don't recall his name, but you will know it. Let me see. All right.
Jared Cotter Kirkland.
Kirtland. Correct. Yeah.
Kirtland, Ohio.
Mm-hmm.
That was named after his father.
Oh.
Yes, I did pick him mainly because he was in Ohio. But it's such an interesting story. Because his father and his mother and his two younger siblings left Connecticut to come to Ohio to be the superintendent of what became, the territory there, which was the Connecticut Reserve. He stayed with his grandmother and grandfather. His grandfather was a physician. His grandfather wanted him to become a physician, and as a matter of fact, had money in his will for him to go to the University of Edinburgh in Scotland, which at the time, in the early 1800s, was probably the premier medical school in the country. He subsequently moved to Ohio to be with his family as he got older. His grandfather died, he went back. According to the will, it said either University of Edinburgh or anywhere else you would like to go. They just opened Yale University, and he was in the first class at Yale University. Not a bad institution. Not only that, the War of 1812 was going on, and nobody wanted to be transporting themselves back and forth from Britain, or the British Isles, for that matter. But he learned horticulture from his grandfather. Many items are named after him. There's Kirkland's whippoorwill, that is a bird, obviously, and he began to graft cherry trees, and lived in what is now Lakewood, Ohio. He lived on a large farm property there. Was a faculty member at one of the, I've never gotten the official name of it, but one of the early medical schools in Cleveland, and then became one of the original faculty members, which ultimately became Case Western Reserve University Medical School. And, but one of the things he was doing was he was commuting between Lakewood, what is now Lakewood, Ohio, and the University of Cincinnati, teaching at the University of Cincinnati Medical School. But because their year of education ran coincident with the growing season, he could teach and then go up there and plant trees and grow and then go back and teach in the fall. Yes. Interesting story. Yeah, great guy.
Thank you. Yeah.
I was wondering, out in Ripley, where the slaves went from there. They were heading, most of them, up to Canada to cross over.
That was the original intent, and there were more Underground Railroad trails through Ohio than any other state in the Union, because it was so easy to get to the northern Ohio border, cross Lake Erie here in Canada, as opposed to other places like Pennsylvania, and Pennsylvania was, western Pennsylvania was pretty much like Ohio. But eastern Pennsylvania was more like New York and the United States. So it was easier here. But typically you would take somebody probably no more than 15 miles from your particular station where you're the conductor. And we had several that down in Ohio, down in the Ripley area. So they had 2 or 3 that they would typically go to. And they would have some idea of which ones were capable of taking someone on without putting themselves at risk. But you know the foundation of the Underground Railroad. You do know it's not really a railroad.
Yeah.
The slave catchers, bounty hunters, would say we saw them coming across the river, and then it's like they went underground. So there you had this underground, and then you, for years, everybody was known as a conductor. Well, who has conductors? Well, it's the railroad. So it's the Underground Railroad. So one of the things we do at the center is we have this thing called the Underground Railroad, where we portray various characters. And one of the students said, "Where do they keep the locomotives?"
Yeah.
So, you're educated in Ohio, aren't you?